One of the things that's most difficult for writers who are writing for the social sciences for the first time is understanding how to produce a reasoned argument, for lack of a better word. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is reasoning. So we need to begin with the understanding that in social science writing, evidence means research results. When you read a scientific paper, the things that the researchers find, like they do an experiment, or they do a survey, or they do a content analysis, or they do a network analysis, and the results of their research, that is what constitutes evidence for you, right? What they find, not the stuff that they reported on in their literature review. Like the first several pages where they're justifying their own study, that's them talking about other people's research. That's them inferring things from other people's research. That's not evidence. That's a combination of them reporting on evidence from someone else and their insights into that evidence. You don't get to use that as proof. Okay, it'd be kind of like if you went into court and you were asked to testify about what you'd witnessed of a crime, and instead you said, well, I was reading the newspaper, and the newspaper said, right, that's no good, right? You need to report what they actually found. That's the evidence. You also don't get to use the speculation that they provide in their discussion section, like in the last pages where they're saying, well, maybe this is why we saw what we did. Maybe this is a thing. You don't get to use any of that. That's not evidence either. The evidence is what they actually found. Direct quotes, not evidence. The title of the article that they wrote, not evidence. The title of the journal it was published in, not evidence. The only thing that counts as evidence is what they empirically demonstrated, what they measured, what they observed, what they found as a consequence or an outcome of their research. So that's what you start out with. That's the stuff that we know. You know it, they know it, your reader knows it, because that has been empirically demonstrated. Okay. So now you're asking yourself, how does that add up to a paper? Well, evidence itself is not your paper. Evidence is the foundation of everything else in your paper, right? To understand this metaphor, let's think about building a house. So you're going to build a house, and first you identify a site at which you will build that house, and on the site right now is some dirt or some sand. And let's say you build a house. Various forces are going to act on that house, whether it's wind or earthquakes or what have you, and there are forces acting on the dirt or the sand or the whatever as well. And so over time, you start to experience some problems, right? You lose your house to an earthquake. All right, so let's think about the right way to build a house then. So you have identified the spot where you're going to build your house, and the first thing you do is you go and you lay down a foundation. For most houses today, that's one big slab of steel or iron reinforced concrete. It's just this big, solid, heavy thing. And if the dirt shifts underneath it a little bit, that's fine. So then when we build a house on top of it, the house is solid. It stays put. In fact, we attach houses to foundations or make them so massive that they can't be shifted from their foundations, because that foundation provides stability. It makes the whole thing make sense. Without evidence in your paper, just like that house that we saw, you're sunk. Right? Without the evidence, you don't have a leg to stand on. Right? You need that evidence to provide your stable foundation to give you the rest of your paper some stability and some safety. The way you do that is you start with the evidence. Okay, the evidence is the first thing. You don't start with your conclusion. You don't start with your thesis. You start with what is the evidence? What does the evidence objectively say? And then, once you've articulated what the evidence says, you make observations about that evidence. You think about it, and you share your thoughts with your readers. In doing so, you're drawing inferences from that evidence one small step at a time. You're not making giant leaps. You're taking one small step at a time. You've actually learned how to do this before, or at least you have teachers who try to teach you this before. Probably somewhere in 7th or 8th grade, you were presented with some version of the 8-sentence paragraph, right? Topic, sentence, concrete, detail, commentary, commentary, concrete, detail, commentary, commentary, concluding sentence. Let's just cut down to the part that's most important for our reasoning from the evidence section today, and that's this little block of concrete detail followed by commentary, 2 sentences of commentary. In this case, our concrete details refer to research findings, right? Those specific, empirically demonstrated things that were taken from the studies. Your first commentary is going to be some sort of observation about that research finding. And your next commentary is going to be a second observation about that same research finding, or potentially an insight about the observation that you already made, right? And that's what you're going to do. So topic sentence is going to say, this is what the paragraph's about, present a research finding, make an observation about that finding, and then build from there. We can look at a couple of examples real quick. So, and I encourage you to pause the video and take a closer look at these, read through these. So, in one paper, we could pose the research question: what's the impact of media on smoking? And the research finding is a specific reference to 2 different surveys that both found the same thing, which is that if you watch positive depictions of tobacco use by characters in movies, you're more likely to smoke. And then the observation is going to make a direct reference back to that research finding. One possible explanation for this pattern is that adolescents are influenced to use tobacco by watching attractive characters use tobacco. Note that it's saying, it's not the same as the finding. It's saying, this is the finding. Here's one possible explanation for that finding. It's not taking a huge leap. It's not saying, therefore, we should ban cigarettes. It's saying, this is the evidence. Here's one little step from the evidence. The next observation or insight is going to take it one small step further, or one alternative or parallel step. Let's look at another example. What causes people to become fans? Taylor and Gil Lopez, 2020, found that cognitive flexibility was associated with a greater likelihood of identifying as a fan of a fictional text, and with stronger identification as a fan among fans. Okay, that's a research finding. That is, like, in their results section, that's what Taylor and Gil Lopez said. An observation on that research finding might be, because personality traits are relatively stable across the lifespan, cognitive flexibility is likely an antecedent to fanship, meaning it comes first. To continue to write your paper, you just keep going. You can keep building that chain of insight, one small step at a time, until you've been able to share clearly the insight that you have into that evidence. It's important to note that every insight or observation is rooted in the evidence and is about the evidence. A common mistake that people make is they present the evidence, and then their insight or their commentary shares the same topic as the evidence, but doesn't really deal with the evidence. The substance of the evidence is itself. Every insight is about the evidence and is rooted in that evidence. Every insight or observation is a small step from the evidence or from the preceding insight. We advance one small step at a time. If I ever get to a sentence and I can't understand how you got there from the preceding sentence, there's a problem. In addition, and I can't stress how important this is, the insights are from your brain, not from the discussion section. If you're just summarizing the discussion section, then I'm not reading a paper, I'm reading a summary. I'm not interested in reading a summary. I'm only interested in reading your insights on the research results, not the insights that you're echoing from someone else. Oh, there's the foundation.